Wowee, it's so lovely to see this beautiful film again, and I want to thank you all for being here with us this evening. Ron, what inspired you to make the film? Where did the idea come from?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for coming. You're a terrific audience. It's a homecoming for me personally and for this film, really. It's where it began, right here across the street, for Gene and his career at the Fountain at Lincoln Center. How this film came about was it came about from Julie Nimoy and her family, basically, who Julie and her husband David. It was a pleasure to work with them. They are terrific executive producers. Their family were good friends with the Wilder family. And at the time, Karen wanted to do, this was a few years ago, we started in 2018, Karen wanted to do a film about what she went through regarding the Alzheimer's, which is basically what you saw at the end here. When we got involved in it, we said, well, there's a much bigger story to tell here regarding Gene's life and career, so we wanted to expand on it, and we just kept going. We even had a longer version than this. So that was basically it, and we stuck with the Alzheimer's part. It was still an important part of this, and Karen wanted to dramatize what happened. There were some Alzheimer's organizations and drug companies that got involved in financing this film, so we wanted to make sure that we accommodated them as well. So that's basically how it started.
Can I just add that there was no network involvement, so we got to pretty much make the film that we wanted to make.
Wonderful.
And so there was something really wonderful about that there were hardly any notes, and so the bottom line is if you don't like the film, you can blame us. If you like it, then we'll take the credit.
I will also say that Glenn and I learned something in the process of making this film, is that when in the future we have to deal with TV networks and movie studios, and they tell us to cut out something, we'll always say, you're right, you got it. Never listen to them.
I learned a lot from Mel Brooks tonight. And Peter, what was your first impression on meeting Gene?
My first impression, I was in Germany already filming, and we were doing all the exterior shots first. So Charlie Bucket running, delivering the paper, which was easy for me because, my mic isn't, my mic, okay. See, I'm not good at doing this.
You're great.
So I was doing all the exterior shots of Charlie running, and Gene arrived on set, and I was new. I had never been in a film before. I had very limited theater experience. I enjoyed doing it. It was great fun, but I wasn't a pro by any stretch of the imagination, so I was pretty nervous. But Gene, like Zero Mostel, when Gene met me for the very first time, he wrapped his arms around me and gave me a big hug, and I knew that this was going to be a lot of fun. He just, my level of nervousness went way down, and it was, again, I look back, one sliver of my life, I went on to do something completely different other than being an actor, but it's great that it brings so much joy to people, his part in Wonka. And when I got the call from you, and through the years, people call me, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that with a film? And I usually say no, just because I prefer to be a rather private person. But when I heard about this, I said, yes, I'd like to do that. And the interview that you all did with me was wonderful. I just spoke, I think, we were thinking it was going to be an hour conversation, and we ended up spending all day together. It was great fun.
What I think is remarkable about Gene is that everyone, even a 12-year-old child, picked up on his goodness and his decency and his love of the craft. And quite honestly, that's who he was, and we tried to capture that in this film.
That's a beautiful.
I would add on to that with both Gene and Jack Albertson, there was no drama. You came in, you were professional, and they expected us, as the kids on the film, to behave as young professionals. And so they raised the bar. I can imagine Gene, being cast with, 4 kids, 5 kids, probably not what he envisioned, what he wanted to do. But in the end, for whatever reason, it turned out quite nicely.
He just seems like the mensch of all mensches. I mean, and it's lovely to hear his voice again. Was it always your idea, I'm not quite sure who to ask, to use his audiobook as the narration?
Well, I can start. We were very lucky that Gene, he wrote his autobiography in 2007. It's called Kiss Me Like a Stranger. It's available on Amazon, but he also recorded an audiobook that went along with the book. And we licensed it. We were able to use it as his narration. We wanted Gene to speak in first person. We didn't want to retell the story from a third-person perspective. And interviews just didn't do it. So first person was really the way to go. So Gene became our storyteller. We would have interviewed him ourselves had we the opportunity, but that's the way we went. And working with Glenn, we chopped down the excerpts. It was very hard to decide what we wanted to use and what we didn't. We did, I will say, wanted to use the theme of fate, which occurred. It starts with his book starts with the fountain scene, and trying to make the decision, and how that changed his life, being able to navigate one way or the other around the fountain. And we found that actually was a theme throughout his entire book and his life.
And I think in terms of deciding what went into the film, we watched all sorts of interviews with Mike Douglas, with Merv Griffin, with Dick Cavett, his audio recordings, obviously, from his book, and whatever was really important to him, such as the story, "Don't upset your mother, you might kill her." He repeated that story so many times. We knew it was important for him, so that went in the film. The other determining factor, if something made Ron and myself, if we both laughed, if we both thought something was funny, then it was going in. If only one of us thought it was funny, then we'd had to work it out.
Right. Well, that included the sheep scenes, too, of course. Which, by the way, when we ran this past PBS, they wanted all that out. So I don't know if we're going to... I will say, by the way, our distributors here, that I can announce that this film will be released in theaters on March 15th.
Congratulations. That's wonderful. And what did you learn about Gene along the way in this process that might have surprised you?
Well, for me, I mean, I had no idea he almost was fired from the producers. That certainly would have been a course correction in his career. And I learned what kind of guy he was. Unfortunately, we never met him, but his one-on-one with people, when Karen said he really listened, you were the only person in the room when you talked to him. We had a screening in Stamford in his hometown at the Avon Theater, and someone came up to me and said, when Gene was sick, we came up to the house trick-or-treating. This is not part of the film, but we came up to the house trick-or-treating, she said, me and my 9-year-old son, and Karen answered the door. Gene was sick, but she said, "Can we see Willy Wonka?" And out Gene came, brought him into the house. The kid was just overjoyed, and he wasn't well, but he did that. So he really cared about people. That's what I learned about it, his caring about other people.
I think the thing that I learned was that Karen Wilder was the love of his life. He was with Gilda for 4 or 5 years, and that's what most people think of him. But Karen was his wife for 25 years, and she cared for him during that horrible illness. And so we're hoping with this film that it'll raise Alzheimer's awareness. We knew if we made a film about Alzheimer's, no one would want to see it. But we're hoping in this case that seeing a film about this wonderful man who entertained so many of us would introduce people to Alzheimer's and possibly help find a cure for this horrible disease.
I would also add that Gene was not enamored with show business. He liked the show, he didn't like the business, and he was not a Hollywood person. He liked Connecticut, Stamford. That's where he was based, but he did not care for the business of Hollywood. So when he went off to his own thing, he did his own creations, painting, writing. He even composed. Some people ask, why is Harry Connick in this? And Harry and his wife and Gene and Karen would have dinner together. They were neighbors in Stamford, in that area. And Gene he even wrote music. We didn't even get into that, but he wrote the opening theme song to World's Greatest Lover. Harry heard it and recorded it for him. So when you hear that opening number in the movie, that's Harry and Gene together.
Well, Willy Wonka has made such an impact on American popular culture. Did you envision that, or are you surprised by the longevity?
Yeah, we did not have a clue. 50 plus years that people would still be talking about Wonka. And, great story, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Again, there's probably not a fourth grade teacher out there that hasn't read that story to her class. So it started with a great story, and then Gene Wilder, Jack Albertson, and other people in the film, for whatever reason, it really has made a lasting impression on a lot of people. What I learned about Gene Wilder are several things. People ask me, well, what's your favorite Gene Wilder film? And to be honest with you, as a veterinarian, I kind of like the sheep movie myself. But that's another story. But what I was impressed with, watching the film, whenever you see Gene at home, there's dogs around him always. And I never noticed that the first time I saw the film, which was kind of neat.
That was Gilda's dog that was Sparky.
Yeah.
That was present, or Sparkle, that was present at his wedding to Karen. Mm-hmm. So the dog sort of crossed over the two marriages.
I would say also about Willy Wonka, the reason why we know about it so well today, because it died obviously in the theaters back then. When I was a kid, I never saw that movie. I don't think it lasted long enough. Is DVD, and my kids grew up on Willy Wonka only because of the DVD, and that's what made it gave its resurgence.
And Young Frankenstein. I have to ask. I mean, when Gene pounds on the table in Will and Grace, it just makes me think of there, I touched it. Am I crazy?
Absolutely. You haven't touched your food. Absolutely. Yeah. No, we felt such a responsibility here just because we grew up loving these films, and we knew that Mel, Brooks was going to be seeing our handiwork, and it sure as heck better be good. And he was the first one to say, I love this film. And he introduced it in Los Angeles when we premiered. You were there, Peter. And there were lines up and down Wilshire Boulevard, I think because he had tweeted how much he liked the film. And it was seen by 2.1 million eyeballs. So that was a nice start for the film.
Yeah, his interview is just fabulous. How long did you actually spend with him, and what was it like?
It was great. Mel said, I'll give you half an hour. And we ended up staying an hour, and the only thing that interrupted it was his doctor came in to visit, and I think he might have kept going. I don't know. COVID got in the way. We had planned, and Karen begged him, and because he turned us down, and then finally he said, okay, I'll do it. And so we rushed over there in his house in Santa Monica. We have a whole nother film just on the producers and the making of it, based on the stories that he told us, things like, Dustin Hoffman was supposed to be cast in it as the Nazi screenwriter that was Kenny Mars, but Hoffman got taken away by a film to star with Mel's wife called The Graduate. So he didn't make it in The Producers. So little things like that. Mel also told us, when he went to make Blazing Saddles, Warner Brothers said, "No farting, absolutely no farting." And Mel said, "You're right, you got it, no farting."
And this is a bad segue, but what do you think being Jewish had an influence on his life?
We're not going to talk about diet now, so.
Right.
Yeah, no.
His lower trek.
Yeah, I mean, Gene was not an extremely religious person. I don't think he really focused on Judaism that much. The closest he came was Frisco Kid. He actually learned to get the Yiddish down and the accent right from a rabbi, but he wasn't really a practicing Jew. In fact, there was another thing that Mel told me that he said, Gene was a Francophile. He was into French culture very much. And so when Mel was like, would drink wine, it was Manischewitz. And Gene taught him to have, better wine, and he has a whole wine cellar in his house now, thanks to Gene. So he brought up his tastes a little bit above Manischewitz. No offense to Manischewitz.
And what do you think is the takeaway that you would like people to come away from seeing this film?
For me, we wanted to make sure that Gene Wilder wasn't lost to history, that his legacy would live on. I think the fact that my 16-year-old son has now gone out and seen every Gene Wilder film based upon seeing this film gives me hope that there's another generation that will appreciate the wonderful work that these men did.
Yeah, it's really timeless.
I might add my favorite film from Wonka, and it kind of encapsulates Gene's career, is Charlie giving back the gobstopper, and Gene says, "So shines a good deed in a weary world." That's Gene Wilder.
Fabulous.
That's Wonka.
Fabulous. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah. Well, all I would say is, in terms of, we also wanted to mention that IMDb. If anybody goes on IMDb, we'd love a vote if you like the movie. If you didn't like the movie, you don't have to vote. But
Don't get near it.
it's imdb.com. We always appreciate that. In terms of Gene's legacy, I think it's to me it's part of the Jew. We didn't expect to circulate in Jewish film festivals. It just worked out that way. But this film and Gene's life kind of mirrors the Jewish experience: laughing, crying, and we figured now's a good time for people to laugh. So that's what Gene left us.
And you've given us all a great gift with this. So thank you so very much.
Thanks for having us.